How do I use storytelling to raise money for my startup? We've been telling stories our whole lives. It's how we communicate. It's how we tell people what's important to us. Most importantly, it's how people remember the important things that we tell them. Yet, when it comes to pitching investors, we don't effectively take advantage of our ability to tell stories. Instead, we list off a bunch of boring facts and figures. Our pitch falls flat, and we fail to get investors excited about our startup. I don't want this to happen to you. In today's video, I'll explain 10 ways you can use storytelling to help you get an investment. I hope you like it. Hi, I'm Brett. On my channel, I help early-stage startup CEOs like you raise money and grow your startup. So if this sounds like you, then hit that subscribe button and the bell and get notified every time I release a new video. Let's get started, and let's start with number one on my list. Number one, the stories you use have to be relevant. When I was in graduate school, there was a seminar on how to use stories effectively in presentations. The presenter showed us a video of someone telling a story about how his favorite football team smashed the competition and that he was going to do the same thing. The story fell flat because the story had nothing to do with him or what he was selling. One of the keys to good storytelling is the stories have to be relevant to your presentation. A great way to start your pitch is with an origin story of what drove you to start your company. For example, a CEO I am working with told the story of how his mother died of cancer, and her death led him to start his company that uses blood testing to do early-stage cancer detection. The story worked because it was relevant. Now let's move to number two on our list. Number two, the stories have to be compelling. One way to think about any presentation you give, including pitching investors, is your goal is keeping your audience's attention. Stories make it easier to do this. However, the stories you tell must be compelling. In other words, the stories have to be interesting. Obviously, it's compelling when you tell a story about how your mom died of cancer and how it became the reason you started your company. Next, let's move to number three on my list. Number three, the stories have to be crisp. The great thing about using stories in our pitches is the stories don't have to be very long. In fact, you want to use stories to emphasize your points. Think of them like little 5 or 10-second snippets that you will add to emphasize your point. For example, it doesn't take very long to tell people that your mom died of cancer, and that's why you started your company. However, that is a story, as simple as it might be. And that type of very short story is much more effective than spending 10 minutes telling your whole family history, including your mom's death. Remember, investors are not the most patient people, so make sure your stories are right to the point. Now let's move to number four on my list. Number four, use stories to increase your credibility. A large part of the decision-making process for early-stage investors revolves around their belief in the CEO. That's you. If an investor believes in the CEO, they're likely to invest. If they don't believe in the CEO, they're likely not going to invest. The perfect place to tell your story is in the team slide. Just to review, the team slide should be a list of the executives the company has. You need to present the slide in 3 minutes or less. The best way to present this slide is with a story about yourself, your experience and history, how it led you to this point in your career, where you are now starting this company. You can also strengthen your credibility using stories to answer specific questions. I'll get back to this later in the video. Next, let's move to number 5 on my list. Number 5, use stories to emphasize what's important. For example, we emphasized in our pitch that we could have a leaner, more effective sales force than our competition. Usually, most investors didn't ask me to clarify why that was true. But one investor, the notorious Donald, did. It was a good question. I answered with a story about how I began my career as a customer of companies like mine, and I was totally dependent on our local salesperson to bring me the latest information. However, as the internet replaced salespeople for basic information, the value of salespeople diminished. We recognized this change, but our older competitors were living in the past with bloated sales forces. Donald nodded his head in agreement, and then he signed off on the investment. Next, let's move to number 6 on our list. Number 6, you can use stories to show how you've evolved and learned. Back to Donald Ventures again. During an update we gave his partnership, I was asked what I had learned about why one of our products didn't sell. I told a quick story about the mistakes we made in understanding our customers and how we had already improved our methodology on the next set of products we had in development. Next, let's move to number 7 on our list. Number 7, use stories to show your vulnerability. You might be asking, what does vulnerability have to do with raising money? The answer is vulnerability has everything to do with raising money. Here's the reason why. One of the things investors are assessing is how open to constructive criticism you will be. You show your openness by telling stories that show your vulnerability. For example, during our last meeting with Raul, before he presented us with a term sheet, he asked me, "What am I going to hear from people that have worked with you about you?" I instantly knew that Raul wanted an honest, no BS answer from me about any skeletons in my closet. So I said, "You'll likely hear from some people that it can be difficult to work with." Raul started pointing to his notebook and his notes about me to his associates, confirming what I said. I knew there was dirt out there about me. By confirming it, I made it less of an issue and myself more vulnerable in the process. Next, let's move to number 8 on my list. Number 8. You can use stories to back up your claims. There are going to be likely lots of stats and numbers in your pitch. Why not tell a story to help explain what's going on? For example, many companies get their first group of customers through hustle and personal contacts. You can tell a quick story explaining how you got your first customers. The story makes the numbers feel more real. Next, let's move to number 9 on my list. Number 9. You can use reverse storytelling if you've got revenue. This is a great way to start your pitch. Instead of an origin story, you start with, "We just passed 1 million in ARR. Let me tell you how we got there." The great thing about this technique is you're instantly establishing your company's credibility by sharing your revenue. And you're telling the investor an idea that what's going to come next will be a story of how you grew your company to 1 million in ARR and your plan to get to, let's say, 100 million in ARR. You get the idea. Finally, let's move to number 10 on my list. Number 10, you also have to know when not to tell a story. This is super important. You have to be able to read the room. And there are definitely times that telling a story, any story, will go over like a lead balloon. For example, I was meeting with Donald Ventures for another update meeting on my company when a partner asked me, "What was your revenue plan for the first year?" I answered 3 million. Then Samir asked me, "And what did you achieve?" And I said, 1 million. Then Samir said, "What's this?" Very sarcastically, by the way. "One of our oldest company is behind plan?" Then I answered by trying to tell a quick story. "Well, you should see the meetings Raul and I are having. It's not pretty." Dead silence in the room. I had screwed up and I knew it. The story was meant to lighten the mood and say there was a lot of pressure on us already. But I had misread the room. They wanted ownership, facts, and what I had learned, not a story. Now, if this content is resonating with you, then please hit the like button right now. One final thought. The stories you use have to be true to you. In other words, you can't just make up something when you're pitching investors. You have to be honest. You have to be vulnerable, as I said earlier. You want to dig deep. The honesty you will show will build trust with your investors. And your honesty goes to another critical point that is difficult for investors to measure, your integrity. Now, I have 2 more things for you today. First, my free startup pitch deck template. It has all the slides you need to develop an awesome pitch deck. Click the link below to get yours for free. Second, join my free group of startup CEOs, Zero to Pitch. It's a community for startup CEOs focused on growing their companies and raising funding for their companies. Click the link below to join. Finally, click the subscribe button to get notified every time I release a new video. I'm Brett at brettjfox.com. Thanks for watching today. Take care. Bye.